I'm Mariana Cordier. Welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. The 2018 elections are the first in Montgomery County to use the matching funds model of elections if candidates in county races take no more than $150 from any one person or group. Linna Barnes, a producer of this show, will tell us how it is working. Since it is October, we all know the midterm elections are less than a month away. In another story on elections, Hailstock, a commentator for this show, will review what we can expect. The dire warning about global warming that was issued this week has gotten the attention for people around the world. Dr. Bruce Fowler, who serves as our science reporter, will explain the warning. The Committee for Montgomery, CFM, has a new executive director who will be leading the group into a new program in its efforts at the state legislature. Maria Maisto will introduce herself and explain CFM's plans. Linna Barnes, thank you for being a guest today.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here, Mariana.
So tell us what this is matching funds,
this
campaign
is matching funds, and the county, more than four years ago, put into their legislation that in the next county elections, which were then a little, for 2018, that if you raised funds for a county election and you only took $150 for any one person, $150 from the primary and $150 for the general election, you would be eligible for matching funds.
So this is where someone like me wants to make a campaign contribution. The max is $150, but I can give less, or
you can give less, or you could give more if you wanted to. But if you give more, then that person can't get the matching funds.
Okay.
And that's what it is. And so you make an election. You as a candidate decide you want to do this, and the county put aside $11 million to fund this program in 2018, the year we're in, and a lot of candidates decided to use it this year. The Democratic winner of the Democratic primary for county executive, Mark Elrich, he ran in the primary using the matching funds model. He got the entire $750,000 he was eligible for because he had that much money that he raised.
But so is that $750 for primary and another $750 for the general, or $750 overall?
No, it's that amount for each one. I think also now he's looking to raise money again because he's running in the general election. Robin Ficker is using that model. He's a Republican candidate. And Nancy Florine, who is an independent candidate, is not using the matching fund. She's not requesting that. She is seeking and receiving amounts from private organizations, from companies, and various things like that.
And it's my understanding, didn't many of the people who ran for the county council, who got through, who made it, the top, the top four, were folks that utilized this system?
Many of the candidates, in fact, most of the candidates who ran for county council and the Democratic primary at large, there were something like over 36, 34 candidates. The four that won, four men, and I'm not going to remember their names, so I won't say. Let's see. It was Gabe Albarino, Will Gerondo, Evan Glass, and Hans Reamer. They all took the matching funds and they raised. That match was $250,000, and each of them got that match.
I blame George Washington. He's the one that started all putting money in for elections and everything.
I'm sure it was George.
But my question is why did the county feel that it was necessary to make sure this happened for
Phil Andrews, who ran for county executive 4 years ago, he had been on the council, I think, for maybe 16, 20 years before
Something
that.
like that, yeah.
He felt very strongly that the matching funds model was the best way in which to get more citizen participation in elections and to take large money. I mean, I will say, and I think it's true, that Nancy Florine, a lot of the money that she's getting contributed to her election is from construction companies and developers.
Okay.
That seems to be what everybody thinks. And she's actually had to give back $18,000 because it was because people were contributing
More
over than over the whatever the limit is.
And I like the idea of the $150 per person, you know, max, because knowing that it's going to be matched and give that candidate more money, because it seems like all of a sudden my voice has more power as an individual than being part of another group or larger group.
Laying the even playing for everybody to vote.
Absolutely, and I think Phil, and he's the one that really pushed for it in the previous council to the one that's in office right now, that we really needed this, and this would make our elections much more democratic. And many people say the reason why there were so many candidates running in this election was because they felt like they could use the matching funds and therefore have somewhat of a competitive race.
Right.
It wasn't going to be just the people that could talk to deep-pocketed people.
Well, that's true, and I'm glad it did come out, and that's why I wanted to emphasize. So, level playing field, you're going on your abilities and past actions in the community, and that's the key.
Exactly.
And do you think that this is something they're going to continue to have for years to come?
I think so. I mean, they have to take it out. I guess what they could do, they could not fund it as well. They did, I mentioned before, they funded it for $11 million, and the council actually took some of that money back because the primary didn't come near to spending anywhere close to half of that. And as many people know, Montgomery County is much more about Democratic primary politics than the general election, though we have the first county executive race that really seems to be competitive because there are 3 candidates.
Okay, so last word, last thing you want to say about
You know
campaign financing.
I was going
Montgomery
to say,
County.
it is something, I'm a part of the League of Women Voters, and it's something the League has worked for a long time, that there should be matching funds to try to get money out. So I think it's great that Montgomery County is one of the first places that has actually put this in place.
Well, thank you so much for that very important information, and for those who are listening and watching, to consider running for election one day,
Exactly.
right? Henry Hailstock, such a
Hi.
pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for
you.
coming.
My pleasure.
So we're still talking about elections. This
Yes.
time we're talking about the midterms that are right around the corner. What do you expect is going to happen?
Well, first of all, let me just say that early voting is October the 25th to November 1st, and the actual election for most of the nation is November the 6th, Tuesday. I want everybody to know that so they have no excuse. They know about that. But I'm looking at voter turnout period. In the U.S., the fluctuation of voters have been somewhat, sensitive. In the past elections, you had voters who have been registered legally turn out 60% of the presidential elections, and in the midterms, you only had 40%.
So we need
that's
more
nationwide.
people to come out and vote.
It's no question. I think the key is getting the younger voters out. You have voters in the past elections, 18 to 29, at a lower rate than the voters who were 30 years or older, which means that we need to get those young people out there to vote.
Does anyone know why they are not voting?
Not getting involved, not caring who's up there. There's not their candidate, so why should I bother voting? And they need to realize that they need to get out and vote to who they feel will be lesser of a evil for them than not. That's how my mother got me out to vote.
I do think a lot of the young people just think, oh, it doesn't make any difference. It's just one vote. Why should I do it? But if you have 100,000 people all saying, okay, well, maybe it does make a difference, then that makes a difference.
It really
This year will
does.
be different. I have 2 brand new voters this year who are excited about the midterms.
Good.
And they're brand new voters.
It should. And believe it or not, odd year presidential elections are a lot lower than normal. And I don't understand that. But I can say that women voters surpass the men voters in presidential elections. Any presidential
Guys are
election.
listening. You need to go vote.
But
Well, what do you think is going to happen in the midterms? What is your expectation with all that's happened with the Kavanaugh and all of that? Do you think anything's going to change with regard to the House and the Senate?
Well, you got to realize one thing. Kavanaugh is just one recent issue. We got to look at what's been happening in the past and who's been voting for what. And if we have a Congress that's going on party lines, we're in trouble. we're in deep trouble. If you look at this year's voting, again, November the 6th, Tuesday, and you can get out and vote early starting November the 25th. You have 435 seats in the House of Representatives. All those are up, okay? And you have 35 of the 100 seats in Senate that are up. So if you think you're not going to make a difference, think again, because you can make a difference in there. And we're looking at the pace of progress, the pace for us, not just for getting out and vote, because it will make a difference. You're talking about taxes, you're talking about land usage, you're talking about the environment. All of this is really key. Now look how we're fluctuating in the economy.
Right.
The Dow is down in 8 months now. It's down lower than it ever has been. And that's because of people uncertainty. And with the the economy the way it is, and back and forth with the international issues, we faced with a serious problem. And the only way to get that corrected is for us to get out and vote.
And there are, in the early voting sites, various sites. It's not just one.
Oh,
so,
yeah, we have
and
it all
doesn't,
over.
you don't have to worry about
I
where
think
you
there are
live.
10 or 11.
Yeah,
Right.
all over.
In Montgomery County.
All over.
All over.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry
You can really
about it.
take advantage
Yes,
of that.
yes.
And I think
And if you're not
it's-
sure, go online.
And for those who have not registered to vote, is there still time to do so?
I think their time is just about up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Time is just about up, but interestingly, if somebody knows this, I think if you go to an early voting site, you can register to vote that day.
That's why I'm saying
You
this.
can't-
Time is just about up.
But it's up for registering in the county, sort of go through that formal process.
Yes.
But you can register the day you vote if you go to early voting site. If you go to register the same day as the election,
No.
November the 6th, you can't do
You
that.
can't do that.
That's actually going to be a ballot question.
Right.
This ballot, whether or not you have same day registration.
If you have that right to do
If you have
so.
that right to do
In
that.
some states, they do.
They do, but
In
not
some
in
states.
Montgomery
Not-
County.
Okay. So the last word on this is November 6th.
Get
go
out to
out
vote.
and vote. And
October the 25th to November 1st, early voting.
all right. So everybody, if
Please.
you hear that, please encourage everyone in your family to do so
You have to.
if they're eligible to vote.
Yes.
So with that, we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And we're back. Dr. Fowler, thank you for coming to our show.
Happy to be here.
So, global warming,
Yes.
dire warnings. What is
All true.
it?
Well, we've talked about this before on this show, that in effect our house is on fire. Our house in this case is the planet, okay? It's warming. The data are very clear that the planet is getting warmer and warmer. Now this has consequences, and we have weather changes, hurricanes, more of those. We also have flooding in places where we didn't have flooding because the ice caps are melting, the ice fields are melting in the north. And I think the thing I'd like to bring out, which doesn't usually get touched on, is that these climate changes permit insects and diseases which normally don't occur here in the northern hemisphere, but occur in tropical areas.
Why don't they occur normally in this area?
Because the life cycle of the insects is such that they would get killed off by the winters here. Okay, they can't it's about reproducing.
But it's just like Zika virus.
Yeah.
Yes.
When that was, I know it was all, Florida, people, pregnant women leaving Florida because they were afraid of getting infected. And that was, if that moves north, that would be really interesting.
Well, more than
Devastating.
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
Horrifying.
Yeah, devastating.
horrifying would be a better word.
Yeah.
For example, I go diving sometimes, and sometimes into the Yucatan Peninsula in the Caribbean. The malaria, which is endemic in that area, the area that I usually check the CDC insect distribution maps, and when they were using DDT and pesticides, the area was much smaller. They've stopped doing that, and then the
Exploded.
it just exploded again.
Yeah.
So, but we're talking about other things. I mean, different kinds of insects that we have that come in from other countries. Invasive species is what they're called. And this has consequences in terms of crops, trees.
And the water. I mean, you just look at what's happening just here. We are really hopeful for the crab population. We're hopeful for the clams and the oysters. And but look at what's happening to our water.
It's too warm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just recently in the news, you saw where a number of dolphins were found, coming washing
Right.
ashore.
Yes.
And whale population. Look at that. It's people. What do they need to see
Right.
and understand for them to know that this is going to really affect us
Yeah.
tremendously?
Well, I was amazed. I had seen a report that Greenland actually has land.
Yeah.
that no longer
Yes,
is
it
on
does.
ice.
Yeah, there's-
And a lot of it, and the recession of that ice glacier is horrifying to think. If you have oceanfront property,
Yeah.
it's going to be underwater fairly
Correct.
soon, like it or not, because the water is going to rise. It's so much water.
Right. Well, like our coastal area here in Maryland, I mean, there are the Eastern Shore, for example. There will be areas there that will undoubtedly be increasingly underwater or not able to grow crops, let's say. The other thing that happens before there's flooding, though, is something called saltwater intrusion, which is basically the saltwater mixes into the aquifers that we rely on for growing crops and things,
Right.
and that's going to affect the ability to grow things.
Right, the
produce-
salt burns,
Yeah.
right? It cauterizes, so
No,
it'll destroy the crop.
And I saw a piece about farming in Talbot County, which is there along the Chesapeake Bay, and that was essentially showing pictures of 1950 where the crops were, and then today.
Yeah.
And it was a saltwater intrusion
Wow.
that had come in as the land. It wasn't so much that there wasn't land there still, there was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't useful for growing crops.
So
Right.
why is it
Yeah.
that there are people out there that say that global warming is a hoax? What is it that justifies that argument, if there's any?
Like our president.
Well, for some people, it's in their financial interest to say that. I want to keep doing what I've been doing because I'm making money at it, let's say. And I'll worry about this 20 years from now, and maybe I won't even be here 20 years from now, and I don't care about my grandkids.
Okay, so we have
But-
about a minute. What would you like our audience to really come away with from this?
Well,
Because there's a lot of global warming warnings that get sent out, and they tell us our house is on fire. What do we do? What's the last thing they should come away with?
well, the good news is that our delegation, our congressional delegation, with one exception, are very much on board with trying to deal with this, not stick our head in the sand as it was, or underwater, and pretend it isn't occurring. It is. And this has impacts on all of us. And it's not just Maryland, it's people in other countries as well.
Okay. So we need to be more informed and active with regard to this issue.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so
Stay on
much.
it.
And I hope you'll come back and give
I'll be
us an
back next
update.
week.
We'll need you.
Maria Maisto, did I pronounce your
That's
last name?
correct,
Yeah,
yes.
great. So you are now the executive
I
director of
The Committee for Montgomery. That's right.
So
Committee for
tell us a
Montgomery.
little bit about it.
So Committee for Montgomery is an organization, it's a coalition, a broad-based coalition of education, labor, business, civic, and community organizations that has worked together for several decades now, I believe, to lobby the state legislature on issues of common concern for the good of the people of Montgomery County.
Awesome.
And I, as someone who started out in Montgomery County, I'm sort of from here. I grew up in the DC metro area, moved away for 14 years, lived in Ohio, in Akron, Ohio for a while, and just came back. It's an organization that I had never heard of when I was here, but is an organization that clearly is really important and for which there is a real need. So when I came back here after being in Ohio for 14 years and starting a national advocacy organization on higher education issues, I was approached by my friend and colleague David Rodich, who's the executive director of Local 500 of SEIU here in the DC metro area, and he asked me if I would be interested in applying for the first full-time executive directorship of CFM. And I said, sure, it sounds like a great organization. Why do you need a full-time executive director? And he said, it's because we have embarked on a new strategic plan that is designed to make our advocacy more effective.
Well,
And
congratulations
so that's
and
what I'm
welcome
doing.
back.
Thank you, thank you.
So what is the plan for this year? What is the strategy or
Right.
the issue that you guys are focusing on this year?
So one of the things that the committee has done, which I think is really forward-thinking, is they've decided to really focus on one issue at a time and really develop a program for focusing their advocacy on that issue so that it can be replicated for future issues like global warming or getting out the vote or that kind of thing. So this year we're going to be focusing, excuse me, on the Kirwan Commission in higher
what is that?
education. And the Kirwan Commission is the commission that has been charged with making recommendations to the state legislature to improve education in the state. And many of the recommendations are going to obviously have implications for funding. And we are right in the midst of waiting for the final recommendations of the commission. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion and a lot of opportunity for advocacy around the really important quality education issues that people are going to want to see addressed.
And when is that supposed to come out?
Well, I believe that the Kirwan Commission recommendations are supposed to be coming out right around the election time, perhaps right after the election, which might make it a little bit difficult to prepare for session. But, excuse me. But I think because we have started this process, I think we're going to be well positioned once the session starts to begin conversation, to have advocacy that is ongoing and every day.
So, I mean, because the committee from Montgomery has already heard from Dr. Kirwan.
From Rick Kirwan, yes.
They heard from him at the end of last
Right.
year about what he thought the commission would be going, where it would be going. Members of the commission have spoken. Nancy King, Senator Nancy King,
Right. Rich Madaleno.
Senator Rich Madaleno, and the head of the Maryland Education Association.
Right.
So they've all spoken, and so the committee is really getting a good feel for what's
Right.
going to happen when the report comes out.
So
Some of the things.
what's one thing that you guys have identified that you think is going to come out of the report that you're going to need to address? Or
Well, one of the things that we've really underscored is the fact that we need to be better about communicating a coherent narrative about Montgomery County that is accurate, that really truly reflects what the demographics of Montgomery County are, what the needs of Montgomery County are, so that we can counter the misimpression that there's not real need in this county for many populations in our county.
In the past, we've been and still working on a formula
Yeah.
for being funded. And obviously that does not really work, particularly in Montgomery County when the population is changing so drastically.
Right.
And if you look at our numbers at the farm program, that you will see that we have a high number of that. Maybe not necessarily as Baltimore, but it's still a high number for most of the counties. And we're not getting funded appropriately for that. And if we continue to use the formula that we have now, we'll be further and further
That's right.
behind.
Yeah.
We're looking at our students to try to have equality in education. And we want them to move on to whatever they feel necessary to do. And they have to be qualified to do that. And if they're not, we have a problem as citizens here.
I think the perception statewide is that Montgomery County has all the
Yeah.
money, and we are very wealthy, but we also have critical needs. We are speakers of other languages in English. That's a really high percentage of our population.
right, Montgomery County is really diverse.
Right.
It's not what it used to be.
Exactly.
Huge immigrant
So
population.
you got 20 seconds. What's the last thing you want the audience to know?
Well, I just want everyone to know that Committee for Montgomery is going to be very active this year and is going to be reaching out to the communities, and we hope to have much more involvement from people all around the county.
Thank you so much, and I hope you'll consider coming back to the show.
Thank
Come
you.
to that breakfast.
Yeah, come
Thank
to the
you.
breakfast.
Yeah, come to the breakfast.
December
Thank
13th.
you, all of you, for joining me this week, and thank you for joining all of us for this week's edition of Montgomery Weekend Review. I'm Mariana Cordier. Please join us next week at this same time.